تنزيل من رب العالمين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد، رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا، وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يا رب العالمين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. So today is day 13, and we are looking at juz number 13. Now, juz 13, subhanallah, is a very interesting juz in that it covers a number of surahs. So it covers the end of Surah Yusuf, which Sheikh Asad touched on yesterday, and he actually completed Surah Yusuf for us. And then it goes into Surah Ra'd and Surah Ibrahim. So now we're going to see in the coming ajza, the coming juzes to come, that some of them will contain more than one surah, more than two surahs, more than three surahs when we get towards, of course, the middle of the Quran and towards the last 10 ajza. Now, surah here, Surah Ibrahim, Surah Ra'd and Surah Ibrahim, which are covered in juz 13. Now, these two surahs, sorry, they are very powerful surahs. Yes, they're Makki surahs. Now, there's some difference of opinion when it comes to Surah Ra'd. Is it a Makki surah or is it a Madani surah? Now, when we say something's Makki or something's Madani, what do we mean? By that, we basically mean that um, when a surah is a Makki surah, that means it was revealed before the Hijrah. Yes, before the Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ to Medina. And when something is a Madani surah or a surah is a Madani surah, then it was revealed after the Hijrah. And you will see that there are certain themes that both of them cover. So the Makki surahs, those that were revealed in the Meccan period before the Hijrah, they have certain themes. And those themes are the Day of Judgment, the heaven and hell, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, focusing on the whole kind of usul, beliefs of a Muslim. And when you look at the Madani surahs, you find a lot more laws in the Madani surahs. And this is why there's a famous statement of Aisha. She said, if the first thing to be revealed from the Quran was do not drink alcohol, the people would have said, we're never going to stop drinking alcohol. Or if the first thing revealed in the Quran was do not commit zina, the people would have said, we're never going to stop committing zina. Why? Because there were people at that time who were addicted to these things. They were norms of society at the time to drink alcohol and to commit zina. So she said, if these laws were the first things to be revealed in the Quran, the people would never have accepted. But the first thing to be revealed in the Quran, she says, was Al-Mufassal. Those ayat, those surahs that talked about the oneness of Allah, that talked about the akhirah, that talked about heaven and hell. And when people's hearts became attached to Allah, that's when the laws came down. Yes, that's when the laws came down. So the theme of the Meccan surahs, of these Makki surahs, is what? Is Tawheed, is the oneness of Allah, is the Akhirah, is Jannah wa Nar, the Day of Judgment, death. These are the reoccurring themes you find in the Makki surahs. So when we look at Surah Ra'd is an extremely powerful surah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in detail His power and His majesty and how everything is in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the overarching theme of this surah is the Shahadatain. Yes, is the belief in the oneness of Allah, Tawheed, and the sending of the Prophet ﷺ and the messengers, generally speaking, the sending of messengers. Also in this surah, we find the responses given to the polytheists regarding some of their misconceptions when it came to the message of Al-Islam. We also find, which I'm going to talk a little bit about shortly in a bit more detail, is a description of ulul albab, the people of understanding, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes certain traits that they have. And then the surah also affirms the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from verse 30 onwards. So the main themes are the oneness of Allah, the message, the messengers. We find this as the main focus of Surah Ra'd. After Surah Ra'd, we have Surah Ibrahim. Yes, this is the next surah, which is still in Juz 13. And the focus of Surah Ibrahim is on the messengers. It's on the messengers, and they're calling people to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala details this in Surah Ibrahim very clearly, mashallah. When a reader goes through Surah Ibrahim, he will find that he's connected back to the previous generations. He's connected back to the previous nations and and it's a beautiful surah. Um, so the focus, as I said, is on the messengers, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off with the story of Musa alayhi salam, and how Musa alayhi salam was sent to bring his people from dhulamat to nur, from darkness to light, and how Musa alayhi salam reminds Bani Israel about the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them, and how he saved them from Fir'aun. And then we move on to the stories of Nuh and Ad and Thamud, and how the prophets invited their people to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the end of Surah Ibrahim, towards the middle and end of Surah Ibrahim, we have the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam himself. Yes, the surah is named after Ibrahim alayhi salam, and in it we find the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. In particular, the time when Ibrahim alayhi salam left Hajar alayhi salam and Ismail in Mecca. Yes, when you know uh, when we perform the Hajj, we do the running between the Safa and the Marwa. This is in remembrance of what Hajar alayhi salam went through. So it details that part of the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam from verse 37. Um, and the rest of the surah then talks about Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now, what I wanted to focus on very briefly with you are three parts, one part from Surah Ra'd and then two parts from Surah Ibrahim, inshallah. So the first part is in Surah Ra'd from verse 19 to 22. Yes, verse 19 to 22. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a description of ulul albab. Ulul albab meaning the people of understanding, the people of thinking, the people of reflection, the people who really try to ponder and understand this deen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that these are people who fulfill the covenant of Allah and do not break the contract. Number one. Then He says, these people, they join what Allah has ordered to be joined and fear their Lord and are afraid of the evil of their account. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and those who are patient, i.e., these people, they are patient, they're seeking the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they establish the prayer, and they spend from what we have provided for them, secretly and publicly, and they prevent evil with good. Those will have the good consequence of this home, gardens of perpetual residence. They will enter them with whoever were righteous among their fathers, their spouses, and their descendants. And the angels will enter upon them from every gate, saying, Salamun alaykum, peace be upon you, for what you patiently endured. And excellent is the final home. This is a beautiful passage. I really encourage you to take some time out and go and read these verses from verse number 19 to 22, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes these key qualities and characteristics of the people of understanding, that they fulfill the covenant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken a covenant with the sons of Adam, that they are people who are going to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they fulfill that covenant and they do not break the contract. And they join what Allah has ordered to be joined, and they fear their Lord and are afraid of the evil of their account. So these are people who are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They fear disobeying their Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they fear the evil consequence of their actions. That's how they will be held to account in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those who are patient, so Allah describes them that they are people who are patient. They endure the difficulties of this life. They've not had everything easy. We know that the Anbiya went through so many difficulties. Every single prophet faced hardship. And this is why when the Prophet was asked, alayhi salatu wasalam, who from the people was most severely tested, he said, Al-Anbiya, the prophets. They were the most severely tested of all of humanity. So one of the key qualities of these people that Allah is describing is that they are patient. Yes, they are patient with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places upon them. Why are they patient? Because they're seeking the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why they're patient, because they want the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah describes these two key characteristics that we find time and time again in the Quran. There's time and time again in the Quran. They establish the prayer and they give the zakat. Yes, or they spend from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to them. Yes. So these are people who pray, who establish the prayer, who have a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the prayer, fulfill the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they fulfill the right of others by giving zakat. This is first and foremost when it comes to giving that which is an obligation upon you, and then voluntarily giving the sadaqah. This is again something which is what is there to ensure that the weaker members of the community, of society, are taken care of. Yes. So they do this, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes how they will have gardens, and they will be with the righteous from among their fathers, their spouses, their descendants, etc. And the angels will come from every gate and say, Salamun alaykum, that may peace be upon you for what you endured and the patience that you displayed in this dunya. So this is the first passage I wanted to touch on. The second passage is in Surah Ibrahim, verses 6 and 7. In verse 6 and 7, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes what Musa alayhi salam went through and what Musa alayhi salam endured at the hands of not just Musa alayhi salam but Bani Israel, what they went through and what they endured at the hands of Fir'aun. And then he reminds Bani Israel about the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He saved them from Fir'aun. And then we find a beautiful verse in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He then says, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, that if you are grateful, I will give you more. Yes, if you are grateful, I will give you more. And here many of the scholars, they said that Musa alayhi salam is talking to Bani Israel that Allah saved them, that Allah um, had many or gave them many blessings, and they should be grateful for these blessings. And some of the scholars, they also said that when you look at Bani Israel, they went through a lot of hardship. They were tortured by Fir'aun. They were the boys were killed. Those boys who were born from Bani Israel were killed by Fir'aun. So they went through a lot of hardship. They endured a lot of difficulty at the hands of Fir'aun. And here, some of the scholars, they said that there's also a sir, there's also what they call like a secret in this ayah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us that despite the hardships that you go through in life, you should always be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even although Bani Israel went through many, many difficulties and hardships, Allah is telling them that be grateful. And if you're grateful, I will give you more. And this is a rule, a qaida in our deen, that if you want anything, if you want more of anything in life, be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want more wealth, be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want health, be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want children, be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever it is in life you want, be grateful to Allah. Yes, because Allah says, I will surely give you more. I will surely give you more. There's no doubt about it. If you are grateful, then I will increase you and I will give you more. So this is just again a passage I wanted to share with you, some reflections from the story of Musa alayhi salam, and how he commanded his people to be grateful, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then said that if you are grateful, I will give you more. The last section I wanted to touch on is verse 37 in Surah Ibrahim. Verse 37 is a very interesting verse. Here it describes how Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he left his wife Hajar and Ismail in what is obviously present day Mecca, next to the Kaaba, and left them, and he, this was a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's making his way, and Hajar alayhi salam comes, and we all know the story, that are you going to leave us in a place where there's no food, there's no people? And Ibrahim alayhi salam remains quiet, and she keeps asking the question, and then she says, has Allah commanded you to do this? And Ibrahim alayhi salam responds in the affirmative. And then she says, and this is the tawakkul of Hajar alayhi salam, she says, then Allah will look after us. And she returns. Now, what this verse actually highlights is the dua that Ibrahim alayhi salam made when he left his family in the middle of this desert, where there was no people. So he carried on walking, he left them, and he reached an area, and then he turned around, and he made a dua towards the Kaaba. And what is this dua? This dua is now recorded in verse 37 of Surah Ibrahim. He says, رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. He says, our Lord, I have settled some of my descendants in an uncultivated valley near your sacred house. لِيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. Why? What do I want from you, Ya Allah? That they become people who establish the prayer. فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. So first thing Ibrahim alayhi salam asked for is what? Is that they become people who establish the prayer. Secondly, that the hearts among the people incline towards them. Yes, that the hearts of the people incline towards them. Then Ibrahim alayhi salam says, وَارْزُقْهُمْ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. And provide for them from the fruits that they may be grateful. Subhanallah, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of Ibrahim alayhi salam. You've just left your family, you've just left your son, who you waited 80 years for a child, and Allah blesses you with a child. And look at the test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts on Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now that child he's waited so long for, who's so beloved to him, he has to leave him in the middle of a desert. And he leaves him in the middle of the desert and he goes away, and now he turns around to make dua towards the Kaaba. And what dua does he make? Many of us would expect the dua to be what? A dua of safety, a dua of security. Oh Allah, look after them. Oh Allah, take care of them. Oh Allah, protect them. The first thing Ibrahim alayhi salam asked for is what? Is, oh Allah, make them people who establish the prayer. Make them people who establish the prayer. Subhanallah, this shows you the importance of the prayer. This shows you the importance that these Anbiya attach to the prayer. That if they are people who establish the prayer, then in reality, everything else is secondary. Why? Because then they've realized the purpose of life. Yes, and this is why you find that the Anbiya, they put the spiritual needs of their dependents over their physical needs. Yes, they were more concerned with the spiritual condition of their families than they were with the physical and other aspects that we are often engaged with today and always worrying about. And then that's a great lesson, that actually our focus should always be what? Our focus should always be on the spiritual development of our families, making sure that they are spiritually connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what should be our number one dua. Oh Allah, give our children, give our families guidance. Oh Allah, protect their iman. Oh Allah, give them your love in their hearts. Oh Allah, give them the love of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Oh Allah, give them understanding of this religion. This is the way of the Anbiya, that they would give more preference and more priority to these spiritual needs and the spiritual development of their families. And in that, as I said, is a great lesson for us to really reflect on. And then Ibrahim alayhi salam says what? That make the hearts of people inclined towards them, meaning that obviously he's left them in a place now, he doesn't know when he's going to go back to them. Oh Allah, if the hearts of people incline towards them, then people will look after them, then there'll be a community and they'll be looked after. And then he finishes off by saying, وَارْزُقُهُمْ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ. And what? Provide for them, give them rizq, and from the thamarat. Why? لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. And it's so that they may be grateful. And even here, Ibrahim alayhi salam attaches gratitude with the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That when you give them the bounties when you give them these bounties, then inshallah that they will be from those who are grateful. Yes, those who are grateful. And again, many lessons. I'll stop here inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us tawfiq. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the understanding of these Anbiya and allows us to follow in their footsteps. Jazakumullah khair wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
وإنه لحق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم